Live to see it, friends, and welcome to the World Transformed. This program is your guide to an astounding future that lies ahead, one that will be here sooner than you think, and one that you have an important role to play in bringing about. At the World Transformed, we want to introduce you to what may be the biggest transformation of them all, the one that begins by considering and acting on the almost limitless possibilities that lie ahead, and that ends somewhere beyond the reach of the human imagination. So, when does this amazing future begin? Well, today is the day. My name is Phil Bowermaster, and with me in the virtual studio is my co-blogger, co-futurist, and co-host, Stephen Gordon. Hello, Stephen.
Hey Phil, how are you?
Well, I'm super fantastic. Happy Friday to you.
Thank you, thank you. Glad to get to the end of the week.
Yeah, we've been having fun with our topic this week, but it's a little bit of a downer talking about the future gone bad, isn't it?
It can be. It can be. We always manage to put an optimistic spin to it. But yeah, I mean, as we've said in every show this week, in order to get to the good future, we need to consider the bad, and figure out ways to avoid that, and to go towards the good stuff. So,
Yeah, I said on Monday that we're paying our Pareto dues. For those who don't know what that's a reference to, is we use the Pareto analysis to talk about happy ideas about the future, positive ideas about the future versus negative ideas about the future. And we try to have an 80-20 relationship. That is, that for every five good scenarios we give about the future, we give at least one potential downside view of the future. And I think that's the right ratio. We spend most of our time talking about the upside and how good things can be, but we once in a while put our nose to the grindstone and say, here are the possible things, the possible ways that things can go wrong, and here's what we need to do about it. So on Monday, we started out by talking about human downgrades, about the idea that people might start making themselves less than they already are. Wednesday, we talked a little bit about misplaced priorities, about what happens when we're working hard to make the future right, but we're not aiming at the correct targets. And tonight, we're going to talk about the future gone bad, part 3, missed opportunities. What happens when we've got the chance to get to the future we want to go to and we just don't take it? And this might be the saddest of them all. It's the what might have been, especially when you talk about futures that might have been. There's nothing in the world more wistful to futurists like ourselves than that. But I think there's nothing potentially more tragic to the world than the possibility of solving so many of the problems that we currently face, having that capability within our hand to do it and not acting. And I think it's a very real potential problem that we will not act when the opportunity presents itself.
right.
So we're going to start with an interesting example that originally I had listed as a misplaced priority that we might have talked about on Wednesday, but we're going to talk about tonight. I assume, Stephen, you've seen the fatwa issued against trips to Mars.
Absolutely. A cleric, a Muslim cleric, has issued a fatwa stating that Muslims should not take this trip to Mars, and you can kind of see his point. The trips that I think that the fatwa is specifically addressed to are some of these one-way trips that there's no intention to come home from. And I think the idea is that these are suicide trips. Suicide is against the Muslim faith, as I would say probably against all major religions.
Most religions frown on that, absolutely.
Frown on that, and Islam is no exception to that. And saying, but you're committing suicide basically by taking this one-way trip, and don't do it. And so will that have much of an effect on people going to Mars, or will that will some Muslims make the trip? I would guess that yes. There will be Muslims that make the trip to Mars, and
maybe more Muslims will do it once there's a round trip ticket option.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And are it's shown that a life can be full and meaningful on Mars, even if you don't come home.
Right.
And so I think what this fatwa was really addressing is suicide, and that can be understood.
Well, I have to say that I had much better feelings toward it after I read the story than when I read the headline, because you read the headline and you go, well,
Yeah.
what? Why,
Yeah.
why can't they go to Mars? Because you're down
Right.
on technology, because Mars is like unclean for some crazy reason. What could the objection be? And then you read the objection and go, oh, I see what he's saying. He's saying
Yeah.
if you go on a one-way trip to Mars, You're throwing your life away. It's wrong to throw your life away. Now, I'm still going to take issue with that position. And
Okay.
we'll even go so far as to say if that's Islam's position, then maybe they want to rethink. I'm not a Muslim cleric, and it's not really my right to say what another religion should be, but or what any religion should be. But if the position is that the risk is too great to take a one-way trip, all human progress has gone back to a lot of one-way trips now, hasn't
Right,
it?
right. A lot of people left Europe never to return when they came to the New World, and some of those people were Muslim, and one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence was Muslim.
I did
There's
not know
there,
that. That is
yes,
interesting.
yeah, one of them was, and so there's been Muslims in the New World since the very beginning, and those were one-way trips by and large. It was a dangerous one-way trip for most of these people, but they came, and so that's part of our history there.
Yeah,
So
and the truth is, even when you go into prehistory, into the earliest days of humanity, we've had these big leaps from one continent to the next. People putting themselves in canoes carved out of logs and trying to get over to the next island, and who suddenly ended up saying, hey, I think there might be some more land down that way, and pushing on and getting there. Always a one-way
right,
trip, and
right,
this is how we got to where we are, by people being able to take those kinds of risks. The bottom line is that big steps forward have always involved risk, and to
right,
try to take risk completely out of the equation is to punt. It's to say some other branch of humanity is going to be the one that moves humanity forward. And I think, very frankly, if you looked at who's likely to get us to Mars, it's not the Muslim world at this point. They're not likely to do that. And if that fatwa is indicative of the thinking, then you know they have a handicap in terms of in terms of human progress. I really think that um, that they're missing the opportunity to take the next step, and I think it's very unfortunate. It's unfortunate if anyone does it. I don't mean to single out Muslims. Anyone within any group, within any religion or any ethnicity, who takes the position that those kinds of risks shouldn't be undertaken. As individuals, I can understand people making that decision, but to make that decision for the whole group or to make that decision for humanity, I think
yeah.
puts
There
you in a
there
really
are
bad
some
place.
there are some people that are just naturally risk averse, and then there's some people that just thrive on risk,
Right.
and it's probably the people that thrive on risk that are going to make these trips. But to say that because your faith is this, or your culture is this, therefore you can't make the trip, even though you would be quite comfortable as an individual to do so, that would be bad. That'd be handicapping that culture, that faith, or whatever. And so yeah, I agree. I agree. I agree.
Keeping it on space, let's talk about other potential missed opportunities, not just individuals missing the opportunity to go to Mars or humanity potentially missing that opportunity if we get too cautious. Did we miss the boat in space already? Did we miss the boat when we didn't capitalize on the momentum that we had after the Apollo program? After we got to the moon and had this sort of infrastructure in place already around getting into space and didn't take the next step. We've talked in the past to Robert Zubrin, who wrote The Case for Mars, and he talked about using those Apollo rockets to get us to Mars, to actually start exploring the planet, to start settling the planet. And of course, his position is that by now we should already have the second generation of settlers born on Mars, right? The first people arrived, they had kids, and now their kids are having kids. That's how far along we could be on Mars right now if we had continued on the path that we started with Apollo and had maybe taken it up a notch at the time of into the middle 70s and into the 80s if we'd pushed on to Mars. So what do you think, Stephen? Did we miss the boat? Did we miss that opportunity at that point? And is that why we're kind of in the wilderness where manned space exploration is concerned today?
Um, I think that there's a chance that we missed it even before Apollo landed
Okay.
on the moon. Uh, in the early 60s and early to mid 60s, there was a small window of opportunity for a program called the Orion Program.
All right.
And George Dyson has a TED talk about it, And a lot of this is still classified. And it was sort of funny. He gets on the TED stage and says, "Oh, a lot of this is classified."
So
And
let me share it with you.
let me share it with you.
Right.
And hopefully I'll be back next year. If not, I'll maybe I can do the TED talk from behind bars. But
Just in
and so,
passing, the whole Dyson family is awesome, aren't they?
yeah,
They're the
they're
greatest ones.
brilliant.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, they are great. And so he talks about his dad being involved in this program,
Right.
and they were going to build this huge spaceship. We're talking a spaceship these, the with the roughly the same mass as an aircraft carrier. Okay,
Right.
and how are they going to get that thing into space? On nuclear bombs going off, boom, 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 and going into space, and then on into the outer planets. The motto for the program was Saturn by 70,
Wow.
and the numbers worked. They could have made that trip and come back. The only problem is, the environmental impact of that many bombs going off, just getting it into orbit, would have been prohibitive. It's probably a good thing we missed that boat for that purpose. I think that ultimately we will do that. We will build those kind of ships. I think it'll be post space elevator. We build something like that in orbit and then take off for the outer planets with an Orion style nuclear bomb powered spaceship, and that'll be cool. But yeah, we missed that boat, but probably for good reasons. But back to your question, did we miss the boat after Apollo? We kind of did. I think it might not have been sustainable either. Well, certainly not politically. The political will to do this was to beat the Russians to the moon,
Right. Which we
and
did.
which we did, and
Yes.
it was a closer race than a lot of people realize. There was when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were taking off with Michael
Collins.
Collins, thank you. When they were taking off, they were fueling in the Cosmodrome. They were fueling a spacecraft to go to the moon if we failed. That way, they didn't want to take the chance. They figured they only had about a 50-50 chance of being successful in their mission,
Right.
and they did not want to make that. It's one thing to fail after the Americans do.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
but they didn't want to take that 50-50 chance and have egg on their face about a failure if we had and then the Americans turn around and do it. So
Right.
they were waiting on our failure, and then they were going to go. And of course, we didn't fail, so they didn't launch. And so it was a close race. It really was. And so after we beat them and then followed it up with about three or four more missions to the moon, the political will was gone, and no moon base as Apollo was kind of leading up to having a moon base. We never did it, and so yeah, it's in a way it was a missed opportunity. But here's the thing: we weren't going for the purpose of it. In order for us to go and for us to stay, it has to be sustainable. There has to be a reason that we go, and that earns enough money to justify the huge expense of going.
Right.
And so I think ultimately we will. There are lots of resources on the moon, but we have to. But in order for us to make that trip, we have to be going with the idea that we're going to exploit those resources. So, and we'll go and stay at some point. But it wasn't time then. That was a big government program, not done for the purpose of making money or to be sustainable.
Well,
So,
it goes back to our discussion on Wednesday about priorities. The priority was to beat the Russians to the moon. To your point, that's what we did.
and we won, and we did.
and we won.
Mission
And
mission accomplished, and that's
we
it.
adopted this lunar orbit rendezvous approach, which was this beautiful, elegant engineering solution that was good for that. It was good for a one-off trip to the moon, or a series of one-off trips to the moon, but not for creating infrastructure for getting us out into the solar system. It's really sad. The hotly contested debate was Earth orbit rendezvous versus lunar orbit rendezvous. If you go with Earth orbit, you were building a space station in orbit. We're doing a lot of the things that we ended up later doing with the shuttle program, only on steroids compared to what ultimately happened. But lunar orbit rendezvous was just so much cheaper and it was so much easier, and it's a beautiful plan they came up with. Think about Orion. Going back to the original missed opportunity. If we'd had Earth orbit rendezvous, You could have launched Orion from up there, right? We could have been to Saturn
Yeah.
by 80, 85 anyway, even after going to the moon. So yeah, I think the missed opportunities tend to compound on each other. That one leads to another, and that leads to another. But the thing you have to ask is, well, okay, so we missed the opportunity to capitalize on Apollo. So we missed our chance in space. Well, no, we haven't missed our chance in space. What's our opportunity now? Our technology is better now than it was then. I mean,
Right.
we don't have the infrastructure to create Saturn V rockets, which is unfortunate. But ultimately, if we wanted to, we could build much better rockets than Saturn V rockets if we wanted to. Everything about how manufacturing works, everything about how information technology works, everything about everything is better today than it was in the 60s if you're trying to take on some big technological problem. So in
I
fact, our opportunity today is as great as it's ever been
right.
if we recognize it and start to act on it, I think.
Well, I read an interesting article, and I'm sorry I don't have the link, but we'll get the link by by the time you're posting the show notes, Phil. We'll have the link.
Okay.
It was an article talking about how there is downward pressure on the price of the probes that we send to Mars, maybe to the moon, other planets, and basically the brains of any spacecraft where weight is an issue. Okay, and I'm thinking, well, okay, what? Tell me about this downward pressure. Smartphones, and they said we are getting more and more and more powerful computers. We got computers that are many times the power of desktops from a few years ago in the palm of our hands now. And so those are ideal for the brains of a probe.
Oh wow.
And so we can instead of sending one very heavy, very expensive probe that has limited functionality, we have smarter probes that we can send cheaply because the weight is so much less. And maybe instead of sending one kind of dumb probe, you might send four that are semi-autonomous, and they can rove around on Mars and collect things. That's I think it would be a missed opportunity had something got in the way of us developing smartphones. We talked about that in Wednesday's program. Had there been some, like maybe a government program or whatever to supply everybody with the big brick phones back in the late 80s, early 90s, maybe we wouldn't have had smartphones. So smartphones are paying off in ways that we had not thought about before.
And this is a great example. I mean, this is a
Yeah,
fantastic example. Here, smartphones are now providing us an opportunity to do more in space than we would have been able to do had that not occurred. Well, what can we do in space? We can, for example, potentially go to the moon and mine it for helium-3, which is an excellent source of fuel for nuclear fusion. Another one of our favorite topics. If you want to solve a
right.
lot of the world's problems, including potentially climate change and also just poverty and anything else you might want to think about, nuclear fusion is the way to go. We were talking about this the other day. Abundant, cheap energy. Abundant, cheap, clean energy that's not going to impact the environment. One of the great ways to do it, potentially, is helium-3. We don't know for sure it's the great way to do it because we need to get some. We need to go to the moon and get some. Well, if we had the infrastructure to do that, and it turns out that the technology that we're mass producing right now is helping us move in that direction, we can start solving some of these other problems. We have an opportunity to get back into space in a way that we hadn't been in space before, and we have an opportunity to address problems that we know we need to address that we haven't addressed. The opportunity is there. Again, I think it's a question of, are we going to recognize the opportunity and are we going to act on it? I think we are. I think we're bound to move ahead in space sooner or later. Sooner the
Sure.
better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. Well, let's leave space because we got at least one other of these to talk about, and we're running a little bit short on time. What other opportunities might we potentially miss? And actually, along the same lines, what if we've talked frequently about the significant changes that are occurring in terms of automation that are going to make it possible for us ultimately to live in a post-scarcity world, the technology of abundance. What drives it? Artificial intelligence. Automation drives it. Well, what if we never get to post-scarcity? What if we never get to abundance? and it's because we decide to step away from automation in order to protect the one thing that automation is really bad for, which is jobs, which is
Right.
people having employment. That could very much happen, especially as we see people ultimately becoming more and more cognizant of the fact that there is a clash between the two. For a long time, you could always say, look, technology doesn't eliminate jobs. Technology just moves humans up the value chain. It lets us do more intellectual jobs. It lets us do easier jobs, et cetera, et cetera. That still might be true. I don't know that that's not true, but it increasingly looks like we reach a point where that's just not the case, where technology takes all work away and jobs don't exist anymore. And if that's true, then we might get very protective. We might say, no, 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 we got to have jobs. People have to be able to work. So we have to slow down automation. And in the process of doing that, we slow down the very engine of post-scarcity. We slow down the engine of abundance. What do you think, Stephen? Is that a possible scenario?
Oh yes, absolutely. I fully expect to see, imagine, for example, a McDonald's that is fully automated. You basically have one human being that stocks the machine,
Mm-hmm.
if a customer refuses to use an ATM style pad for ordering his food and demands to see a human, there's one human back there. Otherwise, it's a human free facility. Can you imagine, people picketing that?
Right.
Maybe even,
I can.
yeah, I can too. I can imagine people burning something like that down. If people are outraged because of lack of employment. Yeah, I think there's going to be some real societal upheaval over automation as automation takes and obviously takes. Some of the automation that's reduced jobs has been a little less obvious. Okay,
Right.
but it'll be kind of in your face when you have whole restaurants without any people in them serving you food. And
And
I think
the quandary there is this: we know once it starts happening that automation is taking jobs away. Now,
right,
the opportunity is ultimately automation provides wealth beyond belief, and
right.
all the good stuff that people would have gotten through jobs, they're going to get through some other means. Problem is, those means haven't been exactly defined, and we're not, we scratch our heads and we say, well, I'm not quite sure exactly how we'll all benefit from this.
You've lost your minimum wage job, but guess what? You can have a hamburger from McDonald's for 25 cents.
Yeah.
If it's you see what I'm saying? It's
Or maybe you got a machine that produces a hamburger in your house. I mean, there's a lot of different ways
yeah, exactly.
the thing potentially pans out. But then there's where do I get the 25 cents? I don't have a job anymore. So
Right.
the the pressure to continue a model that has worked for us so well of people having employment is going to be intense. And
Yeah.
if that pressure is used to slow us towards post scarcity, I think that will be a hugely missed opportunity. I mean, because one of the greatest opportunities of all time to live in a post-scarcity world that we definitely want to see happen. We don't want anything to get in the way of that. The sooner we can get to the post-scarcity world, the better. But I think there's going to be some pain and some misunderstanding and some steep learning curves along that way. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be tough. I mean, there's going to be a understandable outcry against the very things that's going to be, increasing wealth in society. So, and how is that wealth distributed? There would be a tendency of it to be concentrated in fewer and fewer people. And how do you go about doing it? And so it's going to be tough.
And before the show, we were talking about another possibility, which is an opportunity to realize the benefits of so much of the infrastructure we currently have and to really improve our world for the better by once we have artificial intelligence available, artificial general intelligence available, letting it run things. And again, there might be this reticence around, well, we've always had people run things and now we're going to turn everything over to the machines. There would be real risks there. That would be
Oh wow.
a potentially dangerous thing. But if we knew they could do it better than we can, there still might be so much reticence around handing it over to the machines rather than letting them do it. And that could actually be the thing that keeps us from getting to post scarcity. If we just step back and go, you know what? I'm okay with our new robot overlords. They're gonna take us to the next step. But as I think about it, I think that reticence would be there. But I think people are a lot less concerned about who's running the government than they are about having a job. I think that one is probably the one that they're going to hang on. Not so much. Frankly, I think the way people feel about their government, it's like most people would say, "Yeah, let's give a computer program a try." At this point, I'm not sure
Yeah.
that would be a bad idea at all.
Well, I think what Congress is standing on about a 29% approval rating right now. It's,
Yeah.
Agreed. It's not the most popular. Our government's has seen more popular days. So yeah, but people are attached to their jobs. It is a way that people in our society define themselves.
Right.
Tell me about yourself, Phil. You're going to tell me about your job.
That's
Generally.
right. You tell what you do. Yes.
Yeah. So that's and
No,
so,
I'm a Virgo. That's always the first thing. Just kidding. No, I mean I am a Virgo, but that's not what I say.
yeah, that's not what you said. We define ourselves by what it is that we do,
That's
how
right.
we contribute to society, and we're attached to our jobs, and for good reason. And it's the way that we have advanced society all these years. It's going to be something that it's going to be a tough transition.
Because sadly, that attachment might be the thing that stands in the way of us getting everything we ever wanted out of work, and also advancing society further. So
that's right. It's possible. It's a possibility.
That's where we are. Okay, well, that does it, Stephen, for the future gone bad. We've talked about human downgrades. We've talked about misplaced priorities, and we've talked about missed opportunities. And you know what? We're going to pick all this up at some point in the future, but come next week, I think we're going to be back to our more familiar and a little bit more fun topics. What's our music this evening?
Our music is In Motion by Marquis Adora.
Marquis Adora with In Motion. Well, thank you, Stephen, for putting that together. Thank you all for being with us. As I said, we'll be back on Monday to start a new week of 3 all-new shows, and we hope you'll be with us. And until next time, live to see it.